Welcome to another episode of SportsVibe. I'm your host, Arnav Sarkar, here with episode 73. It's been a few weeks since I've last recorded this, but I'm excited to get back right into the mix. College football, the NFL, the power ranking, or the college football playoff rankings, with the selection Sunday being this Sunday. Conference championship previews. We got a lot to get to. So let's just dive back into it. One of the big games this week, Georgia Tech going to 8 overtimes, where Georgia eventually pulled away, and just a lot of scoring. Georgia Tech had a 17-0 lead. They played a really good game, but the Dogs, were able to come back and get the tie, and they're able to hold on in 8 overtimes. It could have gone either way, but Georgia able to escape against their ACC rivals, who played a very, very, very good game. Not good enough. Georgia improves and advances to the SEC championship game, where they'll play 11-1 Texas, winner getting a bye in the college football playoff, and of course SEC champions. In a year that the SEC has largely been very down, those two teams have largely lived up to the expectations and the hype. I guess the big one being Michigan over Ohio State. Ohio State at 10-2, they fell to the Wolverines for the fourth straight time this season. And it was just a heartbreaker. It was just unbelievable for Ohio State fans. And the worst part is that they played right into Michigan's trap, or into their strengths. They ran the ball right up the middle, where Michigan still had their two Grant and they still had their defensive tackles, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, I believe are their names. But they did just enough on offense. Ohio State missed 2 field goals. Well, Howard didn't play a great game, although he still had 175 yards, 2 interceptions, but they just didn't trust him enough. They went to the ground. They kept going 3 and out every time the defense came up with a stop, whether it be Jack Sawyer with an interception, Caleb Downs. The defense played on its head, but Michigan, they just kept giving the ball back to the Wolverines. Eventually, Michigan found just enough offense. Khalil Mullings with a big 116-yard rushing game on 32 carries and a touchdown. So they played to their strengths. Ohio State, is the finesse team. They do play football through the air, and they just completely blew their shot. And it's just really unfortunate that that's the way it ended up turning out for the Buckeyes. But Michigan, escapes with the win. Ohio State now at 10-2. They still have the 6th ranking in the CFP, college football playoff poll, and they still look good for a home game in the playoffs. So most likely we'll see them hosting a playoff game. Michigan season's effectively over. They do have a bowl game, but what an upset win. This Michigan team coming in as 20.5-point underdogs. Perpetuating the narrative that Ryan Day can't beat the Wolverines, and it really turns the narrative on its head, because Ohio State is supposed to be the team, that loses the big games and wins the big game, or loses the big games, wins all the other games, and at least, but they're basically like a better version of Penn State. But now Penn State here is taking care of their business. They've had some gutsy wins lately. Knocking off, the way they ran a fake punt. They beat Minnesota. They fell short to Ohio State. They had the same thing where they got nervous, but they could have won that game, but they took care of business against Minnesota, against everyone else. They're 11-1, and they're getting rewarded here by going to the Big Ten championship game, and not Ohio State, because as bad as Penn State's track record's been against the good teams, Ohio State just blew it to an unranked, very average Michigan team, and it's embarrassing. It's very embarrassing. It's frustrating. There's no words. They should have won this game by like 40 points. I just don't know what to say. I don't know what to say, but it's just making it very hard for me to continue to like and root for Ohio State if they're going to keep doing this. But who am I to say anything? I guess Colorado, 9-3, knocking off Oklahoma State, who's been terrible at 3-9. Boise State advancing to the Mountain West Championship game, 11-1 record in their own right, the 10th ranking in the AP poll, and the 34-18 win over Oregon State. Memphis over Tulane. Georgia over Georgia Tech. Just talked about that. Let's see. Tennessee over Vandy. They look to be in a playoff spot at 10-2. Army over UTSA. so they're ranked. Another big one, Illinois advancing to 9-3 over Northwestern. They look to be the best of the 9-3 teams. And one of the best non-playoff teams in the Big Ten. South Carolina knocking off Clemson. South Carolina knocking on the door of the playoffs, but they're just a little bit out with their 3 losses, including one to Alabama, who right now has a playoff spot. A few painful losses, but the Gamecocks have really been rolling. I'm knocking off Clemson, who has a chance to get to the playoff with an ACC championship game win. Yeah, I mean, just Big 12's been interesting. Arizona State sitting at 10-2, taking on Iowa State. After a domination over Arizona. SMU looking for a playoff berth. They're the 8th ranking in the CFP, I believe. 11-1. Record as well, knocking off Cal. The last playoff spot thing is an interesting one. We'll get to that a little bit later. Indiana rolling, Alabama rolling, Penn State rolling, Notre Dame cruising as well. Oregon, number 1 seed, 12-0. Texas over A&M, that was a good game as well. I mean, it was really all Texas. A&M had a couple of defensive stops that made it interesting, but Texas rolling into the SEC championship game. And Iowa State, who also sits at 10-2, knocking off Kansas State. They've been a good team all year. They had the win over Iowa, and they've really backed it up in the Big 12, which has been quite the interesting conference. I guess one of the other discussions is Travis Hunter versus Ashton Jeanty. I mean, Jeanty's been unbelievable on the ground. I mean, you have to give Travis Hunter credit because, he's playing really well on both sides of the ball, and you just don't see that. I mean, I would give it to Jeanty. I'm not 100% sure, what they're going to do with that, but I think what Jeanty's doing is out of this world, but so is Travis Hunter. So, UNLV knocking off Nevada, in-state rivals there. So they're going to the big Mountain West championship game, and Boise State can win. They advance to the quarterfinals. They'll have the bye, and looking good there. So and then BYU for Houston, but they're not going to be making it to the Big 12 championship game. So yeah, I mean, that's college football in a nutshell going into championship weekend. Just looking ahead at these conference championship game matchups, a little bit of a preview. You got Tulane versus Army, number 24 ranked. The Black Knights, they're 10-1. Their one loss coming to Notre Dame, where they actually got dominated. But other than that, they look pretty good. Army playing Navy next week in the Army Navy game, and Navy's also been a pretty solid team, although they got blanked by Tulane. So Tulane, Army, UNLV taking on Boise State. If Boise State wins, they basically end up in the playoff. If UNLV wins, they will also, I believe, they'll end up in the playoffs as well. But they probably wouldn't get they probably wouldn't get the bye. But it should be really interesting what happens there. I would say the Boise State Broncos, if they're able to win, they would, like I said, they get the first round bye. They have Ashton Jeanty. They've looked good. UNLV is a very good team, but Boise State did beat them earlier in Vegas. So I would think that they'd be able to pull this one off again. Seeing the odds. Boise State 50.8%, UNLV 49.2%. So Ashton Jeanty in the last matchup limited to 3.9 yards a carry, but the Broncos were able to hang on there and get a win. I would hope they do, so we can see them get the bye. Iowa State, Arizona State, Big 12 championship. I haven't really watched a lot of these two teams, not going to lie. Cam Skatibo, all-star back for Iowa State. This is an interesting matchup, I guess, with Texas out. This conference has kind of been very, competitive. There's been a lot of teams in the mix. I mean, Colorado 9-3. I mean, there's a lot of 8-4 teams in this conference. I mean, and then at the top, BYU's played a really good season. They have the only, SMU's only loss early in the year, but they sit at 10-2, but losing the tiebreakers. Arizona State has had a solid season. A lot of people see them in the 12th spot. Iowa State also has had a very good season. On both teams, 10-2. Don't really know too much about this one, but excited to definitely see how it goes. Winner it will make it into the playoff. Yeah, I mean, that should be a good one. In Arlington, Georgia, Texas, I think is going to be the one. everyone's going to be watching. I mean, Georgia beat them in Arlington earlier in the season, so now basically on their home turf in Atlanta, can the Dogs return to the playoff after a year absence there? I mean, it could be anyone's game. Texas has played good. Georgia's played good. Texas's only loss is to Georgia. Georgia's lost to Ole Miss, and they've lost to Alabama, who's kind of fallen off. Georgia struggled recently. I mean, even with UMass getting in the game, Georgia Tech has pushed them. I could see Texas potentially, swinging back, and so we'll have to see how that exactly goes. The defense for Texas has been better. They put Arch Manning in. I think they could definitely make this a game. It's the two SEC heavyweights here at 10-2. Both teams are basically locks for the college football playoff this year. I think the one I'm the most excited about is the Big Ten championship game. Obviously, as a Big Ten fan. But even in general, it's a breath of fresh air, seeing Penn State taking on Oregon, number 3, Nittany Lions, kind of the benefactor of Ohio State messing up here. They basically, this is like their second chance. They lost to Ohio State in their big game, in their their last big game, but this time around they come back and they really have a chance to play a really good opponent again. Oregon's been even better than Ohio State. So yeah, I mean, Oregon's even tougher, but I would say that they have the advantage on offense. They have Dylan Gabriel, who's looked absolutely insane. The wideouts are more talented. I mean, the Penn State, maybe the running backs are better. The defense might be a little bit better, although Oregon's defense is pretty good too. So, I mean, Oregon definitely is a better team. Both of these teams have been able to dispatch inferior opponents. Oregon, I think, has looked better doing it. Oregon, they are a very good match for each other, but Oregon, I think, is better than Ohio State. They've looked better. They've looked more consistent. Both teams are top 10 on defense and offense, but Oregon just, I think they do look better. They're more complete. They're more balanced. They have more talent on the offensive side of the football, and I think that could give Penn State trouble. But I think Penn State keeps themselves in the game. They should have a higher seed than Ohio State, a home game, but Oregon, I think, will get the bye. They're undefeated for a reason. I think they'll hang on here. But it should be a good game and a chance for Penn State to flip the narrative. I wouldn't rule it out. Penn State struggled with Ohio State. They struggle with Michigan, but they are a really good team. Maybe the mental bug doesn't get to them. They play their best game. They have a ferocious defensive line. If they play with they put their best effort forward, they play a really good game, they could potentially win, but this should be a good one. I'd say Oregon wins it. Penn State slips. If I had to pick all of these, I'd say Army, Boise State. I don't really know about the Iowa State, Arizona State. I'd say Arizona State. I'd say Georgia on their home turf. I think they could knock off Texas. Penn State, or even with the struggles, like it's hard for me to say that they wouldn't be able to do it, considering how it went in Texas, Oregon, and then Clemson, SMU. Clemson looking to backdoor their way into the playoff after slipping to 9-3, including a loss to in-state rival South Carolina. But in the meantime, I mean, SMU's look pretty good. They haven't lost since BYU. They've been pretty dominant. I mean, well, they've played, they've struggled with some of the tougher teams, so they've still been able to find ways to win. I think they're the better team. I don't know. It could be interesting because if SMU wins, Alabama would be in the playoff. It's a 12 seed. But if Clemson wins, then SMU could take their spot, and I mean they should. I would say an 11-2 conference championship loser would be better than 9-3 Alabama, who has 3 losses, including 2 losses to unranked opponents. But that's just me. Yeah, I mean I don't think SMU would fall out of the playoff, but we'll have to see. So SMU, I think, does get into the playoff. Either way, I would assume, but whoever wins the ACC championship obviously does. Clemson needs a win to get in here, but it's a very interesting discussion because I don't think SMU would fall behind Alabama. I don't think they should, but at the same time, I mean, the committee has done stranger things. I mean, I really hope SMU would get in over Bama, but they could just win. They could just win. And get in. So I mean, we'll see. I think SMU does make. I think SMU would get in the playoff, but I don't think Alabama could get in the playoff if SMU loses to Clemson. But I mean, they potentially still can. They could bump SMU out. I don't think they will, but I think SMU will win the game first of all. I think they are a better team than Clemson, but we'll have to see how that one goes. That should be a good game there. The Army Navy game next week. Which will be kind of interesting because Army is in the championship game this year, so it should be an interesting one. And both Navy and Army have, really good records this year. Two of the top teams in the conference, so that should be, quite interesting. Actually, yeah. So I mean, that should be a very good game too. And then some of the bowl games are already out. South Alabama taking on Western Michigan in the Salute to Veterans Bowl. Miami Beach Bowl, Memphis taking on West Virginia, and Hawaii Bowl. South Florida taking on San Jose State. Those three are already on the board. I guess we'll have to wait for the rest of them. Rutgers, after their domination of Michigan State, really big turnaround after losing to Illinois in the heartbreaking fashion they did. Just really good. I mean, on defense, they've really stacked themselves well. I mean, they played really outstanding football. So Joe Harris-Semiak now out, going to UMass, but Rutgers, they're able to move the ball surprisingly well. Kama Nungai is an absolute beast. He's leaving. Ian Strong, Dymere Miller, KJ Duff. This receiving core really good. Kalik Manis able to, find these guys on a regular basis. Really happy with the Scarlet Knights. It could have gone better if there weren't injuries, but they started the season really well with emphatic victories. Exciting victories, even though they were close with Virginia Tech and Washington. October, a big downturn, and then the big swing back in November. Could have been 4-0, went 3-1. So I mean, nothing to complain about. It looks like it's going to be the Guaranteed Rate Bowl in Arizona. It could be the Duke's Mayo Bowl against Louisville, people are saying, or any other ACC opponent. But we'll have to see how things go there for the Scarlet Knights. It depends on all these other bowl games. Bowl games are kind of random, but I would expect the Rate Bowl the day after Christmas. But honestly, who knows? Who knows what? But at the same time, that's pretty much all I got for college football. The other thing is obviously we have to look at the bracket here. With the playoff next week. So I mean, just to take a look at that real quick before I shift over to the NFL. Yeah, I mean, I think I covered all the main talking points, but so right now Oregon with the number 1 seed, they likely hang on to that unless Penn State wins. Texas in the 2 spot, depending on if they win the SEC championship. That's right now. SMU now in the 3 seed, and number 4 is the Boise State Broncos. Based on these rankings here, the first round matchups right now, Ohio State, even though they're the 6th seed, they fall to the 8th spot, hosting the Tennessee Volunteers. Penn State Nittany Lions hosting the Arizona State Sun Devils. So that should be a good one as well. The winner would play Boise State. So maybe as good as of a path you'd like if you're a Penn State fan, if they can hang on to that spot. I wouldn't really see too much of a reason why they would they would fall out of it unless maybe they fall one spot depending on how some other things go. The Fighting Irish at number 6, Notre Dame hosting Alabama. So that's one of the big question marks. Who's going to get the final at large? And then Indiana, the Hoosiers going to number 7 Georgia, the Bulldogs. So yeah, I mean that could be a good one. The winner plays Texas. Winner of the Tide and Irish would play SMU. So yeah, I guess one of the big questions is what to do with these final at larges because depending, like as I mentioned with Clemson, they could jump all the way into the top 4 potentially. I mean, with a win, they definitely be in the playoff. If they don't win, they'd be out. If SMU loses now, do they get a spot over 9-3 Alabama? I would hope so, but knowing the committee, not sure. Miami right now out of a spot. Ole Miss and South Carolina out at 9-3 as well. One of Arizona State and Iowa State would get the bid. So those are like the main questions as to who's going to get that final spot. Either way, it should be a good one. But yeah, I mean, likely it really does depend. My prediction would be if Clemson gets in, I would say SMU would also get in over Alabama this year, unless like they get blown out. However, their strength of record, all of that's going to be considered. They might fall out. They might still keep Bama in. However, if SMU just takes care of business, I think Alabama will get in. So, we'll see how that exactly all plays out there. But the playoff and Selection Sunday in 4 days. So like very excited about that. Conference championship Saturday is this Saturday, and I guess before we that's pretty much all I had for college football. I guess the other thing that I wanted to talk about here was the NFL, obviously. So we'll get into that. It's been a few weeks since I've really talked about football or had this this podcast here, but Thanksgiving week has been quite the exciting one in the NFL, all across the board. So, I mean, let's start with the Lions. Look like the best team in football, 11-1, escaping over the Bears, who had a good game. I mean, although they had to come back in the second half. Caleb Williams, 256 and 3 touchdowns, and the big mistake there, not using a timeout when they had the ball. I mean, not giving themselves a shot. I mean, they could have got themselves in field goal range. I mean, it's a good thing they fired Matt Eberflus because it was just ridiculous the way they mismanaged the clock there. I don't know what they were thinking, but the Lions escaped. The New York Giants, Tommy DeVito time, turned into Drew Lock time. Same result, although the Giants did keep it relatively close this time. Drew Lock with a rushing touchdown. I mean, Malik Neighbors, has been getting the ball, but it just really hasn't looked good for New York. And Dallas getting their first home win. I mean, they were up 27-20 or 27-10 for the Giants, trying to make a comeback, fell short. The Giants 2-10, looking for that first pick. Cowboys 5-7. They're definitely not going to make the playoffs. The Packers over the Dolphins to improve to 9-3. Continue the Dolphins can't play in the cold weather. And the NFC North division is just so competitive because the Lions 11-1, Vikings 10-2, 9-3, or the Packers. They might get all three teams into the playoff as the wild cards. The only and then the Commanders right now sitting in a wild card spot at 8-5. We'll touch on that in just a second. The Chiefs over the Raiders. This was just, I mean, even for if you're a Chiefs fan, you can't be too happy about the way that they just keep finding ways to win games because Vegas put themselves. They gave even with the Chiefs having a lead, Vegas came back. They took the lead. The Chiefs knocked in a field goal and set themselves up. Vegas set themselves up for a good chance to win the game, and inexplicably they snapped the football when their quarterback isn't even ready. They just had to spike it and. It was a false start, I believe. So Vegas should have still been able to have the football, but they changed it to an illegal shift. So now Kansas City gets the ball, and another ref job here. The Chiefs just find the most ridiculous ways to win games. They're not a good team. I mean, last year was they're able to survive and make the playoffs, so they had deficiencies, but I mean they were still a good football team. I mean this year is just like they might be heading towards an Eagles type collapse or the Steelers type collapse. I mean, the way they're headed. I mean, they're barely beating bad teams right now. And if they keep playing like this, I mean, this is going to catch up with them because the Chiefs just, I don't know, they don't look great on offense, to be honest. Their defense looks pretty good, but I mean, they're just barely squeaking out ways to win. If they don't get it together, there's no way that this Chiefs team wins the Super Bowl. Like, I'm sorry. Just gotta be honest about that one. I guess just to, go through some of these other scenarios here or other games here. The Texans taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars escaped with a 23-20 win over the Jags. So they're still first place in the AFC South, 8-5. The rest of the division isn't great, although the Colts keeping themselves in the wild card contention with a thrilling win over New England. Anthony Richardson, 109, 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. Drake May, 238, a touchdown and a pick. So Indy escapes with the win over New England. The Chargers knock off the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins, the hot streak is cooled off. I mean, threw 4 interceptions, 245 yards and 4 picks, 0 touchdowns. Not great for someone who's played well this season, but the Chargers 8-4, looking to cement themselves in the wild card race. in New York, I saw the Jets had the lead early. They looked good. They were up 21-7, but they let the Seahawks come back on them. Leonard Williams with a 92-yard interception return. I saw somewhere that this whole season's been a troll against the Giants with Saquon Barkley and Leonard Williams and Xavier McKinney playing well, and it is. But as bad as the Giants have been, the Jets are one win better, and they have Aaron Rodgers. They have a really good defense. They have Breece Hall, Devontae Adams. I mean, I'd be much more, upset to be a Jets fan than a Giants fan right now. So just to say that, excuse me. Titans taking on the Commanders. 42-19 win for Washington. Complete domination over the Titans. They've had a little bit of a rough go at it lately, losing to, some of these good teams here, like the Steelers, the Eagles, who are heading towards a clash of their own. But even the Cowboys, in a really shocking game, where Jane Daniels threw 2 picks. I mean, there's a lot of special teams mistakes happen in that game. Cavante Turpin with the 99-yard kick return, a bunch of missed kick on the extra point after Jane Daniels found Terry McLaurin, an onside kick return for a touchdown, and Dallas able to get a surprising win. Kick Washington down to 7-5. Washington finally snapping the skid here, 8-5 to keep kind of themselves in the conversation. So they have a late bye and then a trip to New Orleans coming up. Steelers knocking off the Cincinnati Bengals. Pittsburgh 9-3. After bouncing back from their loss to the Browns, they play them again. Bengals just 4-8 now. Their season, basically over. Russell Wilson cooking for Cincinnati. Then Vikings taking on the Cards. 23-22 win over Arizona. So they're 10-2. Cardinals falling to just 6-6. Like I said, NFC North looking really good. Sam Darnold playing pretty well as well. 235, 2 touchdowns through the air. Cardinals 6-6. So the NFC West is certainly an interesting one. And then the Rams knocking off the Saints in New Orleans. They're 6-6 as well. Panthers falling to the Bucks in overtime. Another overtime loss for Carolina, who had 2 consecutive wins and then 2 tough losses. They're Tampa Bay 6-6. Bryce Young playing a lot better with the starting job back. Baker Mayfield 235, touchdown, 2 picks. Buggy Irving 152 yards and touchdown. Mike Evans 118 yards and a receiving touchdown. But a back and forth game there. Panthers able to take the lead with 30 seconds left in the game on the touchdown, and then Chase McLaughlin from 51 yards out to tie the game, and then another one in overtime from 30. So the Eagles, one of the best teams in the NFL, sadly, are now 10-2 after knocking out Baltimore. Lamar Jackson 237, 2 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts a bit of a quieter one, 118. 11 for 19 for a touchdown. Saquon Barkley continuing to do ridiculous things, but this game, kind of more pedestrian, 107 yards and a touchdown, while Derrick Henry 82 rushing yards. Cooper DeJean with a open field tackle, putting Henry on the ground was excellent. But I think the real story about this game is Justin Tucker. Basically, not being himself, missing field goals left, right, and center, extra points. He missed an extra point that would have, put the Ravens up 10-0. Philadelphia launches a comeback. Justin Tucker does hit one from 50 to give Philadelphia cut the Eagles lead 14-12, but 2 missed field goals in the second half. Plus the extra point would have given the Ravens a win, and it's just disappointing because Justin Tucker's been one of the best kickers in the league, and to kind of fall from grace the way he has, just it wasn't really looking good. So it's just 2 for 4 for Tucker there, including a missed extra point. Really cost Baltimore a win over a good Eagles team. So the Birds now 10-2 and, clear of the Commanders by 2.5 games now. So, with the rematch coming up, the Bills in the snow game knocking off the 49ers. Josh Allen was, I believe, the first player to catch, throw, and rush for a touchdown since McCaffrey did it I think one of the fourth player to ever catch his own touchdown pass. It was throwing it to Amari Cooper, who lateraled it back to Josh Allen, and just it's been a great week for Josh Allen, obviously for other reasons as well. But I mean, just a really good game there for the Buffalo Bills in the snow. San Francisco just looked out of place, and the Bills actually look like a really good football team. So if this is the year for them to beat Kansas City in the playoffs, I mean, if there was ever a year for it, I think it's this year. They're looking like they're on fire. They've already beaten the Chiefs head to head. The Chiefs just keep winning ugly. I don't know how that's supposed to be sustainable, but they end up playing LA, the Chargers, who are coming in pretty red hot. So we'll have to see how that one goes. And then finally, the Browns taking on the Broncos on Monday night. This was a good one. Jameis Winston, almost 500 yards of passing, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks. Jerry Jeudy, a monster, 235-yard receiving game against his former team. And then the Broncos still able to get the win. 2 pick sixes on defense. Really help them escape with the victory there. Although Bo Nix also had a pretty decent game, I guess, 294, a touchdown, 2 picks. So Denver able to get the win over the Browns and stay in the playoff race themselves. So I guess just to look at these, some of the top 5 games for the next week. Thursday Night Football with a really good one. The Green Bay Packers taking at the Detroit Lions. 11-1 Detroit taking on 9-3 Green Bay, a big divisional game for both of these two teams who also played last Thursday, so they have another Thursday night game there. Browns Steelers, a rematch after inexplicably Pittsburgh goes to Cleveland, loses one, so now we get the rematch there. Look to cement themselves at the top of the division, especially with Baltimore losing again there. So some of the other ones, the Giants back in action with Drew Lock taking on the Saints. The Saints are 4-8, the Giants 2-10. We'll see if the Giants end up winning that one or not. Kind of hoping they don't, but who really knows? I mean, it depends because I mean the Raiders and the Jaguars also with the 2-10 record, so we'll see. They end up playing each other, so the Giants really look good for potentially a top 2 pick, which would be nice. Some of these other games here, Jets Dolphins, a lot of divisionals, Jaguars Titans. Falcons, Vikings, Panthers, Eagles, Raiders, Buccaneers, Seahawks, Cardinals, Bears, 49ers, Bills, Rams. That should be an interesting one on the West Coast there. Chargers, Chiefs is always a good one as well. And then Bengals, Cowboys on Monday night finisher. But yeah, I mean that's the NFL slate for week 14. I guess just to look at it's probably time to look at the playoff picture here in this late in the season. So why don't we do that while we're on this episode? The Chiefs and the Bills both clinching playoff spots, kind of as usual there. Chiefs, somehow, some way, 11-1 after all the breaks they've been given this season. The Bills looking like the true best team in the conference, 1 game back. So we'll see. The Steelers look to be good with their 9-3 record, first in the AFC North. I think 1.5 games ahead of Baltimore, but they look good for that division there, especially with the head-to-head win, although they do, I believe, have a rematch coming up with Baltimore later on in the season. Let's see some of these other games. Some of these other teams, the Texans in the 4th seed, first in the AFC South. The Chargers with the first wild card. I don't think they're going to be able to catch the Chiefs, but they do look good in that spot. The Ravens, if they don't win the division, they look good for a spot. The Broncos also look good for a spot, 8-5. It kind of shapes up perfectly because the Colts and the Dolphins, the next best teams, the Colts at 6-7. I could see a clear field in the AFC, and then over in the NFC, the Lions, absolutely ridiculous, 11-1. They look like the best team in all of football. The Eagles right now with the 2 seed. First in the East, no one's catching them. Seahawks first in the NFC West. That division, all 4 teams very close. The Cardinals and Rams 6-6. Niners surprisingly 5-7. But we'll see if the Seahawks can continue. They played well the last few weeks. The Falcons right now first in the NFC South. They've had a kind of up and down year. The Buccaneers have kind of struggled as of late. although they're 6-6 as well, so that should be interesting. The Vikings, first wild card, 10-2, sounds about right. The Packers, 9-3, and the Commanders, after their resurgent year, 8-5. And if that holds, they'd end up going to Philadelphia for the first game in wild card weekend, which would be quite interesting in the divisional game. But yeah, a lot of season left. Looking at the teams that are eliminated, the Patriots, Jaguars, Raiders, and of course the New York Giants with a 2-10 record. So it's tanking season. The Jets probably soon to join them. But yeah, and that's the NFL standings. Looking forward to next week and the rest of the season, obviously. But yeah, in the meantime, I mean that's pretty much all I got here for this episode. This has been another episode of SportsVibe. I guess real quick we could do some NBA and NHL. It's been a little while before I sign off. But Cavaliers 19-3, first place in the Eastern Conference. Celtics in second at 17-4. The Magic, the Knicks, Bucks, Hawks, Heat, Bulls, and that's been playing surprisingly well as of late. But they've lost 3 straight. They played themselves out of the NBA Cup group stage. They seem to be beasts in the Western Conference, but when they have to play Eastern Conference teams, they tend to be struggling, which is kind of an interesting thing. And then, the out of the contention right now, Pistons, Raptors, Hornets, Sixers, and Wizards. Wizards have lost 15 straight all of November. So in the West, the Thunder, the Rockets, Mavs, Grizzlies, Clippers, Suns, Warriors, Nuggets, Lakers, Spurs. It's early. Timberwolves, Kings, Blazers, Jazz, Pelicans. The NBA Cup, group stage. We have the knockout stage coming in here. So in the quarterfinals of the NBA Cup stage, we got the Bucks, the number 1 seed there, taking on the Magic as the Bucks try to climb back into relevancy in the East. They are back to the 5 seed, so there's more than plenty of time after a rough start for them in the season. But the Bucks taking on the Magic, the Knicks hosting the Hawks, and then the West, the Thunder taking on the Mavs, the Rockets taking on the Warriors. The Bucks and the Knicks, the 4-0, both went 4-0 in group play there. So yeah. In any case, that's pretty much how the NBA kind of shakes out with the Cup playoffs or the NBA Cup in season tournament. Over in the NHL, did recently go to a Devils game. Maple Leafs, Panthers, Bruins, top of the Atlantic. In the Metro, very competitive race with the Capitals edging out the Devils. Right now, first place in the Metro, the Devils right there with them. Hurricanes lost 3 in a row. They sit at 33 points. The Rangers, 27, and same with the Flyers. And then over in the West, the Wild taking advantage of the Jets falling 4 straight after their hot start. Stars with 32 points in the third spot, and then in the Pacific, the Knights with the 35 points, the Kings 31, Canucks, Flames 30 each. But it's very early in the NHL and NBA seasons. But in the meantime, this has been another episode of SportsVibe. Nice to be back. Next week with the playoff coming out, might do a little bit of a special episode. Might have a guest on for that one. We'll see. But to break down the 12-team playoff field, each team, each matchup, it should be a really good one. And of course, the best around the sports world and the NFL. But in the meantime, it's been another episode of SportsVibe. I'm your host, Arnav Sarkar, and we will see you next time.